The desert sky turned white at 3 in the morning. Colonel Jake Bennett was drinking coffee at Nellis Air Force Base when every alarm in the building started screaming at once. His phone buzzed with an emergency alert before he could set down his cup. Something big had just hit the Nevada desert, and the impact was so powerful that people in Las Vegas thought it was an earthquake. Jake grabbed his jacket and ran to the hangar. Within minutes, he was in a helicopter racing toward the crash site. The pilot kept swearing under his breath as they got closer. Jake understood why when he looked out the window. There was a crater in the desert that looked like someone had dropped a small moon. It glowed with strange blue light, and the air around it shimmered like heat waves in summer. When they landed half a mile away, Jake could see the thing that had fallen from the sky. It was not a meteor. It was a ship, and it was huge beyond anything humans had ever built. The vessel was at least 3 kilometers long, maybe more. Parts of it were buried in the sand, but Jake could see enough to know this was not made on Earth. The metal hull had patterns that seemed to shift when he looked at them. Some sections were torn open, exposing mechanical guts that glowed with dying light. Military vehicles surrounded the crater within an hour. Soldiers set up a perimeter while scientists in white suits approached the ship carefully. Jake was ordered to lead the first team inside. He chose 5 men and checked their equipment twice. Nobody knew if the air inside would be breathable or if there might be radiation. They wore full protective suits and carried weapons just in case. The entrance they found was a massive tear in the hull, big enough to drive a truck through. Inside, the ship was dark except for flickering lights along the walls. Jake's boots echoed on metal floors that felt wrong somehow, like they were softer than metal should be. The corridors were tall, built for creatures much larger than humans. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust that sparkled in their flashlight beams. They walked for 20 minutes before finding what looked like a control room. The space was enormous, filled with stations that curved around a central platform. Screens covered the walls, most of them dead, but a few still showed images Jake could not understand. Symbols scrolled across displays, and somewhere deep in the ship, machinery hummed with faint power. What struck Jake most was the silence. There were no bodies. No crew members, dead or alive. The ship felt abandoned, like everyone had left in a hurry. Coffee cups sat on consoles, if that was what they were. Equipment lay scattered on the floor. But there was no blood, no signs of violence inside. Whatever happened to the crew, they were gone. Dr. Lisa Morgan arrived at the site the next day. She was an astrophysicist from MIT, one of the best in her field. The government had pulled her from a lecture hall and put her on a military plane without explanation. When she saw the ship, she stopped walking and just stared. Jake watched her face cycle through disbelief, wonder, and fear in about 10 seconds. "This is real," she whispered. "This is actually real." Lisa became part of the core team immediately. She worked 18-hour days mapping the ship's layout and trying to understand its systems. More scientists arrived from around the world. The United Nations got involved when satellite images of the crater went public. There was no hiding something this big. Within a week, the crash site had become the most watched location on Earth. Commander Alex Turner showed up to take charge of international cooperation. He was a British naval officer with a reputation for getting impossible things done. His job was to keep 30 different countries from fighting over the ship. It was not easy. Everyone wanted access. Everyone claimed they had the right to study it. Russia threatened to send troops. China demanded equal access. Smaller nations argued they deserved a share of any technology discovered. Alex worked for 72 hours straight to broker a deal. The ship would be studied by an international team. All discoveries would be shared equally. Every nation that contributed resources would get access to the data. It sounded good on paper, but Jake knew how these things worked. Countries would share just enough to look cooperative while hiding their best findings. Dr. Peter Walsh was the engineer who first got one of the alien systems working. He was a short man from Texas with grease under his fingernails and a mind that understood machines better than people. Peter spent a week studying what looked like a power conduit. He traced wires that were not quite wires through walls that were not quite solid. On the 8th day, he touched 2 connections together, and a section of the ship hummed to life. Lights came on in a corridor that had been dark. A screen flickered and showed an image of stars. The scientists cheered. They had made first contact with alien technology, and it worked. Peter grinned like a kid on Christmas morning. "It's beautiful," he said. completely different from anything we'd build, but it makes perfect sense once you see how it works. The team discovered more over the following weeks. The ship had weapons, though most were damaged beyond repair. It had engines that operated on principles human physics could not explain. There were storage bays filled with equipment, medical facilities designed for alien bodies, and living quarters that told stories of a crew that had lived here for years. Captain Nina Rodriguez arrived to assess the ship's flight capability. She was one of NASA's best pilots, someone who had flown everything from fighter jets to space shuttles. Nina walked through the ship with the eye of someone who understood how things moved. She studied the control systems and talked to the engineers about thrust ratios and power distribution. After 3 days, she delivered her report. "This thing could fly," she said. "I don't know how fast or how far, but the engines are intact. Most of the critical systems are damaged but repairable. Give me 5 years and a good team and I could get this ship off the ground." The politicians loved that news. The military loved it even more.
If humans could fly this ship, they could learn its secrets.
They could build their own. Earth could go to the stars. But Lisa had found something troubling. She spent long nights in the control room, working with a linguist named Maria Santos to decode the alien symbols. The writing system was complex, nothing like human languages, but patterns emerged. Maria was brilliant at finding those patterns. Together, they started to translate the ship's logs. The ship belonged to something called the Vakros Empire. The logs told a story of war, of cities burning and fleets destroyed. The Vakros had been powerful once, rulers of many worlds. Then something came. Something the logs called the enemy without ever naming it directly. The Vakros fought and lost. Their empire fell apart. Their people scattered across the galaxy, running for their lives. This ship, the logs explained, had been a research vessel. The crew had been testing new weapons, trying to find something that could stop the enemy. The tests failed. The ship was damaged in an accident or a battle. The logs were not clear. The crew had evacuated, leaving the ship behind. The final log entry was just a few words, and those words made Lisa's blood run cold. "They are coming. We failed. Do not follow our path." She showed Jake the translation. He read it 3 times, then looked at the dead screens around them. "Who's coming?" he asked. "I don't know," Lisa said. "But whatever scared the Vakros enough to abandon this ship, it's still out there." The warning should have made people cautious. It should have made them think carefully about what they were doing. Instead, it made them move faster. If something dangerous was coming, Earth needed to be ready. The ship was not just an opportunity anymore. It was a necessity. Jake watched as the project grew. More scientists arrived. The military increased security. Construction crews began building facilities around the crater to house the research teams. The United Nations announced the formation of the International Contact Initiative, a new organization dedicated to understanding and utilizing the alien technology. But not everyone was happy. Jake started noticing problems. Equipment went missing. Data files were corrupted. Small acts of sabotage that could have been accidents but happened too often to be coincidence. Someone did not want this project to succeed. He assigned Lieutenant Sam Cooper to investigate. Sam was young but sharp, someone who noticed details others missed. It took Sam 3 weeks to find the first suspect, a technician who had been copying files and sending them to an outside source. When they arrested him, the man claimed he was working for his government, that everyone was doing it. He was probably right. The bigger threat came from extremist groups. Religious organizations called the ship a sign of the end times. Environmental groups said humanity should fix Earth before reaching for the stars. Then there were the ones who simply believed alien technology was too dangerous. They called themselves the Purity Movement, and they wanted the ship destroyed. Jake increased patrols around the site. He knew it was only a matter of time before someone tried something serious. He was right. A truck loaded with explosives tried to ram the perimeter fence at midnight on a Tuesday. Security stopped it, but barely. 2 guards died in the explosion. The driver survived long enough to say that humanity was not meant to have such power. 6 months after the crash, world leaders gathered at the site for a ceremony. They stood at the edge of the crater while cameras broadcast. 5 years changed everything. The alien ship, now officially named Lazarus by the United Nations, had been moved to Antarctica. It took 2 years just to plan the move and another year to actually do it. Engineers built a massive underground facility carved into the ice, big enough to house the entire ship and the 10,000 people working on it. The location was chosen because it was neutral territory, far from any nation's borders, and the thick ice provided natural protection. General Frank Morrison commanded the Lazarus Project now. He was a hard man who had spent 30 years in the military, most of it dealing with problems nobody else wanted. Moving a 3-kilometer alien spaceship to Antarctica definitely qualified. Frank ran the project like a military operation, because that was what it had become. Every nation contributed resources, but they also contributed spies. Trust was a luxury nobody could afford. Dr. Kevin Zhang had become the star of the engineering team. He was a quantum physicist from Beijing who understood mathematics in ways that made other scientists jealous. Kevin spent 3 years studying the alien power systems before he figured out the key. The Vacros used quantum entanglement to generate power, linking particles across dimensions that humans barely understood. It was elegant and impossibly complex at the same time. Kevin's breakthrough came at 4 in the morning on a Tuesday. He had been working for 18 hours straight, surviving on coffee and determination. When the equations finally made sense, he started laughing. His assistants thought he had lost his mind. Then Kevin showed them his work, and they understood. Within a month, they had built a prototype power core using human technology to mimic alien principles. It was crude compared to the original, but it worked. The first test of the new power core was both exciting and terrifying. Engineers cleared a section of the facility and set up blast shields, just in case something went wrong. Kevin threw the switch and the core hummed to life. Blue light filled the chamber. Energy readings climbed higher than any human power source had ever achieved. For 30 seconds, it looked like they had succeeded. Then the core exploded. The blast killed 3 engineers and injured a dozen more. Kevin survived because he had been behind a reinforced observation window. He spent 2 days in the hospital and then went right back to work. The failure had taught him what he needed to know. 6 months later, they tried again. This time the power core ran for 6 hours before they shut it down safely. The celebration in the facility lasted all night. Lieutenant Sam Cooper had been promoted to captain and put in charge of security. His job had gotten harder every year. The sabotage attempts had not stopped. If anything, they had gotten more sophisticated. Someone had tried to poison the facility's water supply. Another group had hacked into the computer systems and deleted 6 months of research data. Sam caught most of the threats, but not all. 2 researchers died in an accident that was definitely not an accident. The investigation went nowhere. Sam knew there were spies inside the facility. Every nation had planted people to steal information. Most of them were harmless, just copying data for their governments. But some worked for groups that wanted the project to fail. Sam spent long hours reviewing security footage and personnel files looking for patterns. He learned to trust no one completely and to always expect the worst. Maria Santos had become the head linguist for the project. She had decoded 70% of the alien language, which meant she could read most of the ship's systems and logs. Maria found stories in those logs that made her cry. The Vacros had been a great civilization once. They had art, music, families, dreams. Then the war came and everything fell apart. The logs told of billions dying, of worlds turned to ash, of fleets that vanished without a trace. The Vacros who escaped were the lucky ones, if you could call survival in exile lucky. One log entry haunted Maria. It was written by someone named Krelvor, who had been the captain of Lazarus. He described the last days of his homeworld, watching from orbit as cities burned. He wrote about the decision to abandon the ship after it was damaged, knowing they were leaving behind their best hope of fighting back. The entry ended with a simple line that Maria translated as, "We failed our people. Perhaps the next ones will do better." Danny Hart was 26 years old and had no formal engineering degree. He had learned by taking things apart and putting them back together since he was a kid. Danny got hired because he fixed a problem that had stumped 12 engineers with doctorates. A navigation system kept crashing, and nobody could figure out why. Danny looked at it for an hour, moved 3 components, and it worked perfectly. General Morrison promoted him on the spot. Danny's real contribution came from the way he looked at problems. The educated engineers tried to understand every detail before doing anything. Danny just experimented. He would try something, see what happened, and adjust. It drove the scientists crazy, but it got results. He was the one who figured out that the alien metal could be reshaped using specific sound frequencies. He discovered it by accident while listening to music, near a piece of hull plating. The breakthrough that changed. Everything came from Danny. He was studying the ship's construction patterns when he noticed something. The ship was not built as a single piece. It was modular, made of sections that could be disconnected and rearranged. Each section had standard connection points. It was like building blocks for adults, except each block was the size of an office building. Danny brought his discovery to General Morrison and the senior engineers. "We've been thinking about this wrong," he said. "We don't need to build one ship. We can build many. Lazarus is a template. If we understand the connection systems, we can make our own modules and assemble them." The implications were stunning. Humanity could build a fleet using the alien design principles. They would not be as advanced as Lazarus, not at first, but they would be functional. More importantly, they could be improved over time. Human innovation could combine with alien engineering to create something new. General Morrison authorized the construction of 3 new ships immediately. They would be smaller than Lazarus, about half the size, but they would be fully human-built with alien-inspired systems. The ships were named Endeavor, Destiny, and Horizon. Construction began in orbit, where massive shipyards were built specifically for the project. The cost was enormous, but every nation contributed. This was too important to skimp on resources. Dr. Lisa Morgan had aged visibly in 5 years. The stress of the project had put gray in her hair and lines around her eyes, but she had also become one of the most important people on Earth. Her understanding of the alien systems was unmatched. Lisa worked on navigation, trying to understand how the Vacros crossed the vast distances between stars. The mathematics made her head hurt, but she pushed through. The navigation systems used something the team called slipspace, though they knew that was not what the Vacros called it. Ships could enter a dimension where normal physics did not apply and travel immense distances in days instead of years. The technology required incredible precision. Get the calculations wrong by a fraction, and you would emerge in the wrong solar system or inside a star or nowhere at all. Lisa worked with Kevin to adapt the navigation systems for human use. They built a prototype navigator that could interface with the alien star charts found in Lazarus. The charts showed thousands of star systems, some marked as safe, others as dangerous, and many with symbols they still did not understand. It was a map of the galaxy, or at least a large portion of it, and it was now in human hands. Captain Nina Rodriguez had spent 5 years training for one moment. She learned every system on Lazarus, practiced in simulators that the engineers built, and studied the alien flight logs until she could recite them from memory. Nina was going to be the first human to pilot an alien spacecraft, and she was determined to do it right. The pressure was intense. If she failed, people died. If she succeeded, she would open the stars to humanity. The test flight was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. General Morrison wanted good weather and optimal conditions, even though they would be in space where weather did not matter. It was about psychology more than practicality. The whole world was watching. Nina sat in the pilot's seat, which had been modified to fit human proportions. The controls were a mix of alien technology and human additions. A joystick here, a keyboard there, screens that showed data in both English and Vacros symbols. Lieutenant Jake Mason sat in the co-pilot seat, ready to take over if something went wrong. Dr. Lisa Morgan occupied the science station, monitoring every system. "Lazarus to control. We are ready for departure," Nina said into her headset. Her voice was calm, but her heart was racing. General Morrison's voice came through the speakers. "Copy that, Lazarus. You are clear for launch. Good luck." Nina pushed the throttle forward slowly. The power core responded, feeding energy to the engines. Lazarus shook slightly as it lifted from the ice. The ship that had been buried in Nevada desert 5 years ago and then moved to Antarctica was flying again. Cheers erupted in the control room. The flight was scheduled to last 3 days. Nina would take Lazarus to the edge of the solar system and back, testing the engines at various. 10 years after the crash, humanity launched its first deep space expedition. Admiral Jake Bennett stood on the bridge of Lazarus and watched 3 other ships take formation around him. Endeavor, Destiny, and Horizon were smaller than the flagship, but they were beautiful in their own way. They represented something unprecedented, human-built starships capable of traveling between stars. The fleet carried 2,000 people from 40 nations. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, and diplomats all crammed into ships that were still being tested. Everyone knew the risks. The faster-than-light drives had been tested only twice in controlled conditions. Navigation through slipspace was more art than science. Mistakes could mean death for everyone aboard. But humanity needed to explore. to understand the galaxy they had inherited access to, so they went anyway. Captain Nina Rodriguez commanded the Endeavor. She had become famous after the first test flight, and the military had promoted her to captain of her own ship. Nina liked the Endeavor better than Lazarus in some ways. It was smaller, more responsive, and entirely human-built. The crew was young and excited, ready for anything. Nina hoped their enthusiasm would not get them killed. Commander Alex Turner commanded the Destiny. He brought his British precision to everything he did. The Destiny ran like clockwork because Alex insisted on discipline and proper procedure. His crew sometimes complained that he was too rigid, but they respected him. Alex had a talent for keeping people calm when everything went wrong, and everyone suspected they would need that talent before this mission ended. Captain Lucas Grant commanded the Horizon. He was the youngest of the 4 captains, only 35, but he had earned his position through skill and bravery. Lucas had grown up watching the alien ship being reconstructed. He had joined the space program specifically to fly among the stars. The Horizon was his dream made real, and he pushed his ship harder than the others, always wanting to see what it could do. Dr. Lisa Morgan served as chief science officer aboard Lazarus. She had insisted on coming despite her age. At 58, she was one of the oldest people in the fleet, but her knowledge of alien systems was irreplaceable. Lisa had studied the star charts for 10 years. She knew which systems the Vacros had marked as safe, which ones they had avoided, and which ones held mysteries worth investigating. The destination was Proxima Centauri, the closest star system to Earth. The Vacros charts marked it as a former outpost, a minor colony that had been abandoned during their retreat. Lisa hoped they might find records there, maybe even technology that could help humanity prepare for the Hythar. The trip would take 2 weeks through slipspace, a journey that would have required years using conventional drives. The first jump was terrifying. Admiral Bennett gave the order, and all 4 ships activated their slipspace drives simultaneously. The universe seemed to twist around them. Stars stretched into lines of light. Colors appeared that had no names. Some crew members reported feeling like they were being pulled apart and put back together. Others said they felt nothing at all. Lisa threw up in a waste bin and decided she hated slipspace travel. When they emerged near Proxima Centauri, the sensors immediately detected something wrong. There should have been planets, stations, and signs of the old Vacros colony. Instead, the sensors showed debris fields and radiation signatures that made the science teams nervous. Something terrible had happened here. The fleet approached slowly. Nina took the Endeavor ahead as a scout while the others maintained a defensive position. What she found made her sick. An entire civilization had been wiped out. Orbital stations were shattered hulks. Ships floated in pieces. The main planet showed signs of bombardment so severe that parts of the surface had turned to glass. Admiral Bennett ordered a landing party. He led it himself, taking a shuttle down to what had once been a major city. The ruins stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Buildings stood like broken teeth against a gray sky. There were no bodies, just ash and silence. Whatever had killed the Vacros here had done it thoroughly. Maria Santos was part of the landing party. She walked through the ruins with her scanner, looking for anything that might tell them what happened. Most of the structures were too damaged to read, but she found a building near the city center that was partially intact. Inside there were computers, or what was left of them. Maria worked for 6 hours to extract data from a damaged core. What she found was a beacon, still transmitting after all these years. The message was simple but chilling. Maria translated it slowly, making sure she got every word right. The swarm came. We held for 7 cycles. Tell the others unity is survival. Division is extinction. The swarm. That was what the Vacros called the Hythar sometimes, Maria realized. She had seen the term in other logs but had not understood its significance. Now she did. The Hythar attacked like insects, overwhelming defenses through sheer numbers. The Vacros here had fought for 7 cycles, whatever that meant in their timekeeping, and then they had lost. The fleet spent 3 days studying the Proxima system. Every investigation confirmed what they had feared. The Hythar were real, they were powerful, and they were thorough. When they conquered a world, nothing survived. The crews returned to their ships shaken. This was not abstract anymore. This was evidence of humanity's future if they were not prepared. Admiral Bennett called a meeting of all senior officers. They gathered via video conference linking all 4 ships. The mood was grim. Lucas Grant spoke first. "We need to tell Earth what we found. People need to know this is real." "They will panic," Alex Turner said. "Public morale is already fragile. Show them this and it might break." "Hiding the truth will not make it go away," Nina added. "They deserve to know." Lisa listened to them argue and finally spoke up. "They need to know, but we need more information first. One destroyed colony is not enough to understand the enemy. We need to find survivors if there are any. We need to learn how the Hythar fight, what their weaknesses are. Going home now with just this will cause panic without purpose." Admiral Bennett made the decision. "We continue the mission. We check the other marked systems. If we find survivors, we make contact. If we find more ruins, we document everything. Earth needs intelligence, not just horror stories." They jumped to the next system on Lisa's list. It was marked as a waypoint, a stopping place for Vakros ships traveling deeper into space. What they found was more debris, more silent testimony to a lost war. The pattern repeated at the 3rd and 4th systems. Everywhere the Vakros had been, the Hythar had followed and destroyed. It was at the 5th system that everything changed. Sensors detected ships as soon as they emerged from slipspace. 5 vessels, sleek and deadly, bearing Vakros design elements. They were not derelict. They were active and they were moving to intercept. Admiral Bennett tried to hail them. "This is Admiral Jake Bennett of Earth. We come in peace. We recovered one of your ships and wish to establish contact." The response was a weapons lock. Nina's console lit up with warnings. "They are targeting us," she reported. "Shields up." The Vakros ships opened fire without further warning. Particle beams cut through space, striking the horizon before Lucas could maneuver. The young captain's voice came through the comm filled with static and pain. "We're hit. Engines are offline. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 5. Admiral Bennett ordered the fleet to return fire. This was not what he wanted, but he would not let his people die without fighting back. The Endeavor and Destiny engaged the attackers while Lazarus moved to protect the damaged horizon. The battle was brutal. The Vakros ships were faster and more maneuverable than the human vessels, but the human ships had numbers and determination. Nina destroyed one attacker with a perfectly aimed shot through its power core. Alex crippled another with sustained fire that overwhelmed its shields. But the cost was high. The horizon took another hit, this one critical. Lucas transmitted one last message. "Tell Earth we made it to the stars." Then his ship exploded, taking 200 crew members with it. The remaining Vakros ships suddenly broke off their attack. One was badly damaged and limping. The other 3 retreated to a safe distance and stopped firing. Admiral Bennett ordered a ceasefire. His fleet had won, but the victory felt hollow. They had lost the horizon and everyone aboard. A transmission came through, this time in broken English. "You speak truth? You are from Earth? You found our ship?" Admiral Bennett responded carefully. "Yes. We found a Vakros research vessel that crashed on our world. We rebuilt it. We mean no harm to your people." There was a long pause. Then the Vakros responded. "Our ship. You stole our ship." "It was abandoned," Admiral Bennett said. "We found it wrecked and empty. We did not steal it. We saved it." Another pause. "Come to our location. One ship only. We will talk." Admiral Bennett took Lazarus alone to meet with the Vakros. He left the Endeavor and Destiny behind to recover what they could from the horizon, and to protect the retreat route if this was a trap. As Lazarus approached, Admiral Bennett could see the Vakros ships more clearly. They were old, patched with mismatched repairs, scarred by battles. These were survivors, barely hanging on. The Vakros leader came aboard Lazarus to negotiate. His name was Commander Drelvor, and he looked nothing like the humans expected. 15 years after the encounter with Commander Drelvor changed everything about Earth. The world had united under a single government called the United Earth Government, though the union was sometimes rocky and always complicated. President Helen Carter led with a combination of diplomacy and determination that kept the fractured alliance together. She understood that humanity's survival depended on working together, even when nations wanted to compete. The Lazarus Project had evolved into the United Earth Space Command, a military and scientific organization that controlled humanity's growing fleet. Admiral Kevin Zhang, the physicist who had first cracked the alien power systems, now oversaw all ship production. His genius had not dimmed with age. At 60, Kevin still worked 18-hour days pushing teams to build faster, build better, build more. The fleet had grown beyond anyone's early expectations. 50 warships now patrolled human space. From small frigates to massive battle cruisers, shipyards orbited Earth, Mars, and the Moon, working constantly to produce more vessels. Every ship combined Vacros design principles with human innovations. Humanity had not just copied alien technology, they had improved it. The improvements came from human ingenuity and desperation. Engineers developed power cores that were 30% more efficient than the original Vacros designs. Computer scientists created targeting systems that could track and predict enemy movements using artificial intelligence, though carefully limited to prevent another Hythar scenario. Ship designers made vessels modular, allowing quick repairs and upgrades in the field. Humanity's advantage was not superior technology, but superior adaptability. Captain Sam Cooper commanded the flagship Victory, the most powerful ship in the human fleet. Sam had grown from a security officer into a respected military leader. The Victory was his third command, and he knew her systems better than he knew his own apartment on Earth. The ship was a testament to human determination. 2 kilometers long, armed with weapons that could crack a moon, and fast enough to outrun most opponents. Sam's crew was diverse, pulling from every nation on Earth and even a few colonists from Mars and the outer system. They worked together with the efficiency that came from knowing their lives depended on each other. Sam ran a tight ship, but not a cruel one. He believed in discipline through respect rather than fear. His crew would follow him into hell if he asked. And Sam knew that someday he might have to ask exactly that. General Maria Santos headed intelligence and alien relations from Earth. She had become fluent in 3 alien languages now, including Vacros. Maria coordinated contact with the various species humanity had encountered over the years. First contact protocols, translation systems, and cultural databases all fell under her authority. It was demanding work, but Maria thrived on it. Understanding others had always been her gift. Humanity had found other species while exploring the galaxy. Most were refugees like the Vacros, running from the Hythar or hiding in remote systems. The Telsin were traders who had survived by avoiding conflict and staying mobile. They traveled in merchant fleets, never settling anywhere permanently. The Telsin taught humans about galactic economics and safe trade routes. In return, humans provided them with improved ship engines and protection from raiders. The Korthan were warriors, a proud species that refused to run anymore. They had lost their homeworld 20 years ago, but continued fighting a guerrilla campaign against Hythar supply lines. The Korthan were impressive in battle, fearless and skilled, but their numbers were few. They had perhaps 50,000 warriors left, scattered across a dozen ships. The Korthan respected strength, and they respected humanity's willingness to fight. An alliance formed naturally. The coalition was born from necessity. 4 species, all facing extinction, agreeing to stand together against the Hythar. The agreement was signed aboard the Victory, with representatives from Earth, the Vacros remnants, the Telsin clans, and the Korthan warriors. They pledged to share resources, technology, and intelligence. They promised to defend each other's territory. Most importantly, they agreed that humanity would lead ship production, while others contributed specialized skills and knowledge. Not everyone on Earth supported the militarization. The Earthbound movement had grown larger and more vocal. They held protests in major cities demanding that resources be redirected to planetary problems. Earth still had poverty, still had environmental damage, still had inequality. Spending trillions on warships struck many people as insane when children went hungry. President Carter faced assassination attempts from extremists who believed the war was unwinnable. She survived 3 attempts, each one more sophisticated than the last. Security around government officials became suffocatingly tight. The divide between those who looked to the stars and those who looked at Earth's problems grew into a chasm that threatened to break. The United Earth Government, Commander Eric Stone, represented the new generation. Born after the alien ship crashed, Eric had grown up in a world where space travel and alien civilizations were normal. He graduated from the New Space Academy at 22 and quickly proved himself exceptional. Eric commanded a frigate called the Defiance, and he pushed his small ship to perform like a battlecruiser. His tactics were unconventional, often reckless, but they worked. Eric believed in humanity's destiny among the stars with the faith of someone who had never known a different world. To him, Earth was just the beginning. Humanity would not merely survive the Hithar. They would expand, grow, and eventually dominate this region of space. His confidence inspired his crew and worried his superiors in equal measure. Eric represented hope and arrogance blended together, and nobody was sure which quality would define humanity's future. The warning came without drama. A long-range sensor station detected unusual readings in a system 60 light-years from Earth. The signature matched Hythar technology, according to the databases provided by the Vakros. A probe was sent to investigate. It never returned. A second probe sent a brief transmission before being destroyed. A single Hithar scout vessel was surveying the system. Admiral Jake Bennett, now 70 years old but still commanding respect, called an emergency meeting of coalition leadership. Representatives gathered via hologram in the Victory's conference room. Everyone understood what the Hythar probe meant. They had been noticed. The countdown to invasion had begun. "We need more time," the Telson representative said. She was a small creature with blue fur and 6 eyes. "Our fleets are not ready for large-scale combat." "We will never be ready," Commander Drelvor responded. The old Vakros warrior looked even more scarred than before. "The Hithar will come when they come. We prepare as best we can and hope it is enough." The Korthan representative, a massive being named Korthrak, slammed a fist on the table hard enough to make the hologram flicker. "Finally, I am tired of waiting. Let them come. We will show these machines what it means to fight living warriors." President Carter spoke calmly, projecting strength she did not entirely feel. "How long do we have?" Admiral Bennett consulted with his science team before answering. "The probe will report back to its fleet. If the Hythar follow their usual pattern, they will send a scouting force first to assess defenses. That gives us perhaps 2 years, maybe 3. If we survive the first encounter, they will send the main invasion fleet. That could be 5 years or 50. The Hythar are patient. Then we use the time we have," President Carter said. "We build more ships. We improve our weapons. We prepare defensive positions. And we pray that 2 years is enough." Ship production accelerated to levels that would have seemed impossible a decade earlier. Shipyards worked triple shifts. Resource extraction from asteroids increased dramatically. Humanity's economy transformed entirely to war footing. Luxuries disappeared. Everything became about survival. Most people accepted the sacrifices. Some did not, and expressed their displeasure through protests and occasional violence. Captain Nina Rodriguez, now an admiral herself, proposed a bold strategy. Rather than waiting for the Hythar to reach Earth, the coalition should meet them in neutral space. Choose a battlefield that favored defensive tactics and force the scouts to fight on coalition terms. It was risky. If they lost, there would be no second chance. But Nina argued that letting the Hythar reach human colonies would be worse. Admiral Bennett supported the plan. He had learned over decades of service that sometimes the boldest choice was the safest. Waiting for the enemy to come to you meant fighting on their terms. Better to seize initiative and dictate the battle's conditions. The coalition agreed to Nina's plan. They identified a system called Threshold, a name someone thought was appropriately dramatic. The system had dense asteroid fields that could hide ships and disrupt sensor readings. It was 60 light-years from Earth, far enough to keep the battle away from colonies but close enough to retreat to if things went wrong. The coalition assembled its entire available fleet at Threshold. 50 human warships, 8 Vakros vessels, 20 Telson merchant ships converted to fighters, and 15 Korthan raiders. Against them would come the Hythar scouts, estimated at 30 vessels based on previous scouting operations observed by the Vakros. The fleet practiced coordination for weeks. Different species had different. The Hythar moved with perfect coordination, like a school of fish acting as one organism. Their 32 ships spread out across the Threshold system, scanning for weaknesses in the coalition formation. Admiral Jake Bennett watched their movements on the tactical display and felt a chill run down his spine. The Hythar were not just machines. They were intelligent, calculating, and completely without fear. Captain Sam Cooper stood on the Victory's bridge, surrounded by crew from a dozen nations. His tactical officer was from Japan, his weapons officer from Brazil, his communications officer from Nigeria. They worked together with practiced efficiency, their differences forgotten in the face of a common enemy. Sam gave orders calmly, keeping his voice steady even though his heart was racing. The first exchange of fire came from the Hythar. A cube-shaped vessel targeted one of the Telson merchant fighters with a concentrated beam of energy that simply deleted the ship from existence. No explosion, no debris. One moment the ship was there, and the next it was not. The Telson fleet scattered in panic, their merchant instincts telling them to run. Admiral Nina Rodriguez acted immediately. "Telson ships, hold formation. If you break, they will pick you off one by one. Trust your shields and fight back." Her voice carried authority that cut through their fear. The Telson ships steadied, though Nina could see their formation was shaky. Commander Eric Stone pushed the Defiance forward, using the frigate's superior speed to close distance with the nearest Hythar sphere. His crew looked young and scared, but they trusted their captain. Eric had trained them well. He ordered a full barrage from every weapon, pouring energy and missiles into the sphere's shields. The Hythar ship absorbed the damage without slowing and returned fire. Eric threw the Defiance into a spin that would have made half his crew sick, if they were not already pumped full of anti-nausea medication. The Korthan raiders attacked with savage efficiency. Korthrak led his warriors in close-quarters combat, using their smaller ships to slip inside the Hythar defensive perimeter. The Korthan fired old-style projectile weapons. Metal slugs accelerated to incredible speeds. The weapons were primitive by galactic standards, but they worked. A Korthan raider shredded the surface of a pyramid-shaped Hythar vessel, exposing critical systems. Other Korthan ships pounced on the weakness like wolves on a wounded deer. Commander Drelvor and his 8 Vakros vessels fought with the experience of warriors who had battled the Hythar for decades. Drelvor knew their patterns, understood their tactics. He positioned his ships to create crossfire opportunities and exploit blind spots in Hythar sensor coverage. When a cube-shaped Hythar ship focused on the Victory, Drelvor's flagship hit it from behind, shields blazing through shields to score direct hits on the hull. The battle turned chaotic. Ships darted between asteroids using the rock formations for cover. The Hythar adapted quickly, adjusting their tactics as they learned coalition patterns. A second Telson ship died, this time from a missile barrage that overwhelmed its shields. A Vakros cruiser took critical damage and began venting atmosphere. The crew evacuated in escape pods while the ship drifted helplessly. Admiral Bennett realized the Hythar were testing them, probing for weaknesses. The machines were not fighting to win. They were fighting to learn. That gave him an idea. "All ships implement randomization protocol," he ordered. It was a tactic human commanders had developed specifically for fighting artificial intelligence. Instead of following predictable patterns, each ship would take actions based on random number generators. It would make coordination harder, but it would also make the coalition fleet impossible to predict. The change confused the Hythar. Their targeting solutions became less accurate. Ships they expected to move left went right. Weapons fire came from unexpected angles. The machines adapted again, trying to find new patterns, but the randomization kept them off balance. Sam Cooper saw an opportunity. 3 Hythar ships had grouped together, probably to coordinate their attack on the Victory. Sam ordered his weapons officer to prepare the main gun, a massive particle cannon that ran the entire length of the ship. It took 30 seconds to charge and drained the power core to dangerous levels. But when it fired, the beam punched through all 3 Hythar ships, leaving glowing holes through their centers. The machines went dark and drifted in space. The coalition fleet cheered. First blood had been drawn, but the celebration was short-lived. The remaining Hythar ships regrouped and launched a coordinated assault. 5 vessels focused all firepower on the largest target, the Victory herself. Shields flared and buckled under the onslaught. Alarms screamed across the bridge. Hull breaches were reported on 4 decks. "Shields at 20%, the tactical officer reported. "We cannot take another barrage like that." Sam made a decision. "All power to forward shields. Charge main gun again. We are going right at them." His crew looked at him like he was insane. Flying directly at 5 enemy ships was suicide. But Sam trusted his instincts. The Victory accelerated. Shields reinforced forward, weapon charging. The Hythar ships maintained their assault. Confident they could destroy the human flagship before it reached them, they were wrong. The Victory fired at point-blank range, the particle beam catching 2 Hythar ships before they could evade. The 3rd ship grazed the Victory's side, both vessels taking damage. The 4th and 5th broke off, their calculations suddenly favoring retreat over continued engagement. Sam had gambled and he had won. Eric Stone was not so lucky. The Defiance had taken too many chances, pushed too hard. A Hythar pyramid caught the little frigate with a direct hit that tore through its engine section. Eric ordered evacuation, but he stayed at his post, using the last of his maneuvering thrusters to ram the Defiance into the pyramid. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the battlefield. Nina watched Eric die on her sensors and felt a piece of her heart break. He was 32 years old, born after humanity found the alien ship, and he had lived his entire life preparing for this moment. Now he was gone. She keyed her comm to all ships. That is what we fight for. For the Erics of our species, the ones who never give up. Make his sacrifice count. The Coalition fleet fought with renewed fury. Korthan raiders tore into Hythar formations. Vakros cruisers fired with practiced precision. Telsin merchant fighters used their speed to harass and distract. Human warships coordinated attacks that overwhelmed individual Hythar ships through focused firepower. The tactics were working. The Hythar realized they were losing. Their scouts had expected weak resistance, primitives who would flee at first contact. Instead, they faced a coordinated fleet that fought with determination and adaptability the machines had not encountered in centuries. The Hythar command ship, a massive sphere at the center of their formation, transmitted a signal. The remaining Hythar vessels broke off and retreated to the edge of the system. Admiral Bennett wanted to pursue, to destroy them all while they ran. But Nina's voice stopped him. "Let them go, sir. We won. We need to recover and regroup." Bennett knew she was right. The Coalition fleet was battered. 12 ships were destroyed or damaged beyond immediate repair. Thousands were dead, including Commander Eric Stone. Pursuing the Hythar into unknown space would risk losing more ships. They had achieved their objective, proving the Coalition could fight and win. The final count showed the Coalition had destroyed 25 Hythar vessels. 7 escaped, including the command sphere. By any measure, it was a stunning victory. The Hythar had lost most of their scouting force. The Coalition had held threshold, but the cost was heavy. Along with Eric, thousands of crew members from all 4 species had died. The victory needed major repairs. A Vakros cruiser was destroyed when its power core went critical. 5 Telsin ships were lost. The Korthan had suffered the worst casualties percentage-wise, losing 30% of their forces. But Korthrak called it a good death, a warrior's death. His people would celebrate. Admiral Bennett sent a message on all Hythar frequencies, broadcasting across the entire region of space. Nina helped him write it, making sure the translation systems would convey the message accurately. "We are humanity. We stand with the Vakros, the Telsin, and the Korthan. We will not run. We will not hide. We will fight for our homes, for our futures, for our right to exist. Come for us, and we will show you what it means to face those who refuse to die." The message spread across the galaxy, carried by automated relays and passing ships. Other species heard it. Refugees hiding in remote systems, survivors wondering if resistance was possible. The Hythar had never been stopped before, never been defeated, and here was a young species claiming they could fight back. Within months, other groups began to contact the Coalition. A species called the Bryn sent ambassadors asking to join the alliance. The Zephics, aquatic beings who lived in mobile ocean habitats, offered their engineering expertise. Slowly, the Coalition grew from 4 species to 10, then 20. Each brought unique skills, different perspectives, and desperate hope. Humanity became the center of this growing alliance. Human shipyards produced vessels faster than any other species. Human engineers modified designs for different species' needs. Human diplomats negotiated between groups that had been enemies for centuries.